Hey guys, today we are going to be going over our inequalities and how to use variables and solve for a variable within that inequality and then graph it. Before we move on, let's talk about some symbols we use in inequalities. What are some of those symbols? Greater than, less than, equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. All right, so we're going to be seeing a lot of these as we're going through. Like I said, we will be solving inequalities as well. Solving inequalities is just the same as when we would just solve one-step variable equations. Okay, so just a couple reminders when it comes to that. What is a variable? A variable is a letter that stands for an unknown number, and we're trying to get that variable by itself. Okay, so we have to use what is attached to the variable, use the opposite operation. What I do to one side, we do to the other, and then we go from there until the variable is by itself. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's first start with number lines. Okay, in a previous lesson, you did see me go over how to kind of do a number line, but I want to go more in detail today about that. If I'm looking at this, the first one says x is less than or equal to 3. Use a blank circle for inequalities that use the blank or blank. So if we're looking at this, if we have an inequality that has a line under it, what kind of circle do we need to use? Closed. We need to use a closed circle. That means it's just shaded in. So if there's that extra line under it, we need a shaded in dark circle. So if I'm looking at this and I want to graph x is less than or equal to 3, first of all, I go to the number, where's the 3? And it is a closed circle. So we're going to make it a nice solid dot. Okay, the next thing, we've got to figure out which way to go. So if I'm looking at this inequality, if my variable is first, this only works if your variable is first. If your variable is not first, you're going to have to rewrite your inequality to where the variable comes first. Okay, so this variable is to the left, which is where we want it, and the inequality is also to the left. It's pointing to the left. So that is going to be the same thing as that arrow. If you outline those arrows, you can kind of see which symbol matches. And since that one matches this way, we're going to shade to the left. Okay, so you just kind of want to make it darker so that you can see. Now, before we go on, we want to check to make sure we shaded it the correct way. What we can do is we can take a number that is on the side that we shaded, plug it in. What is it called when I take a number and put it in the place of a variable? Substitution. Very good. Let's pick this one right here, number 1. If I plugged 1 into this inequality, 1 is less than 3. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. So, or equal to. So it works out and we're good to go. All right, so now that we've done that, let's do one without the equal to on it. So this is x is less than 3. Use a blank circle for inequalities that use less than or equal to. What's the difference between the ones we're using now and this one? That line underneath it. So these two do not have the lines. So since they don't have the lines, when we go to graph it, we are going to use an open circle. So we still start with the number 3, and an open circle is just a circle that's not shaded in. Okay, and it is less than. So we're looking at that. The variable is first, so we're good to go. And we're pointing it to the left because that inequality, that little tip is pointed to the left. All right, so we are going to shade that to the left. And like I said before, if for us to check ourselves, let's go ahead and take a number on the side that we shaded and plug it in. Let's use 1 again. 1 is less than 3. Is 1 less than 3? Yes, it is. So it does check out. Okay, so remember, whenever we're doing things on a number line, you want to check yourself, all right? And you want to plug in a number using substitution to make sure you shaded the correct way. All right, let's look at this next one. It says, write the inequality and graph. A child needs to be at least 48 inches tall to ride the Ferris wheel. So if we're looking at this, it says at least 48 inches tall. Now I want you to think, if you were at an amusement park, could you be 48 inches and get on that Ferris wheel? You could. Could you be 49 inches and get on that Ferris wheel? You could. Okay, so as you can see, our number, that number is getting bigger. So if we, first of all, need a variable, so we need a variable to represent the child. So what is a good letter we can use for that? C. Very good. Okay, it says needs to be at least 48. So we know we're comparing it to the number 48. Now we just have to figure out what symbol we've got to put in between the two. And like we were saying, you could be 48 inches and still go on there. So we know that it can be equal to. So we're going to go ahead and put that line there. But now we've got to figure out, is it going to be a greater than sign or a less than sign? So if we're thinking, this is the height of the child, and that height of the child has to be equal or bigger than that 48. So what symbol would I use? A greater than. Okay, so if you think about that and we wanted to plug some numbers in, I could be 49 inches and still get on that Ferris wheel. So that substitution works out. I could be 50 inches and it still work out. Okay, so we know that we're in the right spot here, but now we need to graph it. So on this one, we have a number line that doesn't have any numbers. Okay, the main number you have to worry about is the number that you are comparing your variable to. And that number is going to be what in this problem? 48. Very good. So I'm going to put it in the middle of that number line, and I'm going to have 48. So now that I have that 48 there, I can go ahead and graph this. Okay, so we're looking here. Our variable is first, so we can do our little trick, make it easy on us. Remember, if the variable is first, we can use this inequality to show us. Now, let's talk about the circle. What kind of circle is going to be on 48 and why? It's going to be a closed circle because there is a line under it. Very good. Now, if I'm looking at this, that inequality, the tip of it points to the right. Okay, so I would find the way where the inequality of that number line points to the right. So I am going to shade to the right. And remember, if we want to check ourselves, we can use what? We can use substitution. Very good. All right, let's look at this next one. It says the temperature is more than, I see a keyword there, I'm going to go ahead and underline it, is more than 2 times yesterday's low temperature of 45 degrees. Okay, so the temperature of yesterday's. And we're talking about the temperature of today. Okay, so first off, what is a variable that I can use in order to represent temperature? I can use T. Let's go ahead and use T. I like to use variables that represent those letters so we kind of have an idea of what they stand for when we get to the end. Okay, so if I have the temperature, okay, temperature is more than, so I see a more than sign. So we want to go ahead and put that more than sign. More than, greater than, those are the same things. They're like synonyms like we deal with in English, okay? 2 times yesterday's low of 45. Okay, so if I've got 2 times, I'm going to show that as 2 and a multiplication problem, right? So if I'm looking at that and it's 2 times what? 45. So we're going to go ahead and put that 45 there. Okay, so here we kind of have to go a little bit further. Now we're looking at this and we see, are there anything that we can combine? Yes, there is. What is 2 times 45? 90. Very good. So we're going to do that and bring everything else down without touching it. So we get the inequality of the temperature, today's temperature is going to be greater than 90 degrees. Okay, see, we just broke apart that question and put the numbers that represent each other into one. Let's go ahead and graph that. Now that we have this main inequality here, what number do we need to put on the number line? 90. Okay, now what kind of circle is going to be on that? Is it going to be an opened or a closed? It's going to be open because there is no line. Now, our variable is first, so that means we can use our trick of how to shade. Now, remember, the tip of that inequality is pointing to the right, so that means we are going to go to the right. Remember, if you outline the edge of those arrows on the number line, it's going to look like the same inequality. So we're going to go ahead and shade that to the right. And again, if we wanted to check ourselves, we could use substitution to plug it in and see if it makes sense. Okay, let's look at this little note down below. You solve inequalities the same way you solve equations, by isolating the variable using the inverse operation. The only difference is that the inequality has more than one possible solutions. Okay, so if I'm looking at that, remember, we're solving, we have to isolate. What does isolate mean? Get the variable by itself. In inverse, what's another word for inverse? The opposite operation. All right, let's look at a couple of these. I'm going to go over the first four with you, and I'm going to leave the last four for you to do on your own. So let's look at these first four. Okay, this first one, I'm going to come off to the side and write it just so that we have a clear view. We've got x minus 2 is greater than 4. Now, just like when we were solving one-step equations with an equal sign, what did we put on that equal sign? We put a line. Well, we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to put a line. Now, what is the variable in that equation? X, very good. And minus 2 is connected to that. So what is the opposite of minus 2? Plus 2. And what I do to one side, I do to the other. Very good. So a number and its opposite gives you 0. So these cancel out, leaving you with what on this side? X. We got to slide down that inequality. It's still the same thing. Be careful there. Make sure you don't put an equal sign. Make sure you put the inequality, because if you put the equal sign, it's wrong. That's only one solution. Inequalities have multiple solutions. Okay, so then here we've got 4 plus 2. And what is 4 plus 2? 6. Very good. Now let's go ahead and graph it. Okay, so I'm going to write what we came up with. We came up with x is greater than 6. So we've got to put our dot on what number? On 6. Very good. And is it going to be opened or closed? It's going to be opened. Why is it opened? Because there is no line. Okay, so since our variable is first here, remember we take the tip of that inequality and we shade that way. So the tip of that inequality is going to the right. So we are going to shade to the right. And if I wanted to check myself, let's take one of those numbers. Let's take 8. We take one on the shaded side, use substitution to plug it in. So 8 is greater than 6. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. So that one is good to go. All right, let's look at number 2. We've got x over 3 is less than or equal to 7. All right, so here, again, before we get started, what do we put on the inequality? We draw that line. Okay, let's go ahead and bring that inequality down so we don't forget it later on. Now, what is the variable there? X, very good. Now I see a fraction bar. What operation is a fraction bar represent? Division. So what is the opposite of division? Very good, multiplication. So we are going to multiply by 3, or the reciprocal. So this is like 1/3, and we would be multiplying by 3 over 1. And what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Okay, so these cancel each other out, and that leaves me with what on this side? X, and then what is 7 times 3? 21. Very good. So we've got x is less than or equal to 21. Now, if I want to graph this, let's go ahead and figure out where we're putting our dot. Where does the dot go? On 21, and what kind of dot is it? What kind of circle is that? It's going to be closed because of that line. Okay, and we have it written where the variable is first, so we can take the tip of that inequality and shade it that way. So which way is the tip of that inequality facing? To the left. So we are going to go ahead and we are going to shade to the left. Very good. All right, let's look at this next one. We've got 6x is less than 30. First thing we're going to do is do what to that line? The inequality needs a line on it. Okay, what's the variable? X. And what is attached to the variable? 6. Very good. And by multiplication. So what's the opposite of multiplying by 6? Dividing by 6. And what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So 6 divided by 6 cancels each other out. It leaves you with 1, which is the same thing as saying our x is less than, and what is 30 divided by 6? 5. Very good. So we've got x is less than 5. Okay, so if I'm looking at this, now we've got to go and we've got to graph this. So we have our variable first. Since our variable is first, we can use our trick. So where does our circle need to be? On what number? On the 5. Now, is it going to be an open circle or a closed circle? It's going to be open. Why? Good job. There's no line, so it has to stay open. Now, the tip of that inequality is pointing which way? To the left. So we are going to shade to the left. Okay, so now that we've shaded that inequality, we can take a number and we can plug it in. So let's say, and it has to be on the shaded side, I use 2. 2 is less than 5, and that does check out, so we did do it correctly. All right, let's do one more together before you take some time to do some on your own. So we have x plus 9 is greater than or equal to 11. First thing we need to do on that inequality sign is what? Draw a line. Very good. What is the variable there? X. What is attached to the x? A plus 9. Very good. So what is the opposite of plus 9? Minus 9. And what I do to one side, I do to the other. Good job. Okay, so if I'm here, these cancel each other out because it's a number and its opposite. Remember, a number and its opposite always gives you 0. Okay, so it leaves us with x on this side. We want to bring down that inequality so we do not forget it. And what's 11 minus 9? 2. Very good. So x is less than or equal to 2. So we do have it written to where the variable's first, so we're good there. We can use our trick. But where does that circle need to go? On what number? On 2. And what kind of circle is it going to be? It is going to be a closed circle because we have that line. Okay, and the tip of that inequality is pointing to the right, so we are going to go ahead and shade to the right. All right, guys. Now I want you to try the next ones on your own. So go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, go ahead and check yourself. I do have the work there as well as the shading. See if you got what I got. Okay, guys, just a couple reminders. Remember, if you have a line under that inequality, you use a closed circle. That is a completely filled in circle. If you have an inequality with no line, you need an open circle. We always want to solve for that variable, and in order to solve for that variable, we have to isolate it or get it by itself. So we have to use the opposite operation or the inverse operation. What we do to one side, we do to the other. Very good. And whenever we go to graph our inequalities, make sure that we write our inequalities with that variable first so that we can use that very important trick of which way the tip of the inequality goes is the way that we shade. All right, guys, good work today.